In fact, I've just started it now, so there we go. Do you know how many more people we're expecting on the call?
I would expect a few more people, so let's just give it a couple of minutes and then we can start introductions. I think we're going to be very generic about that, and Ingrid and Rory let you provide a little bit of background information.
Okay.
Sounds like a good plan. I'm going to hop back to my email and just make sure that there's no one having problems.
Yes, that's probably a good idea.
Okay, there was only one person with a problem, and I forwarded them the information, so they should be coming on soon.
Okay, I think we'll give it a couple more minutes, maybe till 5 past, and then possibly we should get started.
Yeah, we're going to distribute these recordings to the group. I still need to I need some technical support to download and archive the one we did last week, but that will probably happen in the next couple of days. But if everyone can't participate this morning, it really is okay, because we told everyone they would be available outside of the actual presentation.
Okay, and the format that I'm saving this in will be an MP4, so it should be fairly usable by just about everybody.
That would be great. Would you mind, Rory, if the National Transportation Library archived a copy of this? Do we need something in writing for that?
Personally, I'm fine with it. I would ask Ingrid, since it's her presentation.
No, that's fine with me as well.
Great. I'll follow up with email.
Okay, wonderful. So we've got one waiting for names, so let's let them join, and then maybe we should get going. Maybe just have a quick check that everybody can hear and see before we do that.
Connected to go to meeting. Well, that's nice. There we go. Meeting is starting.
So we still have one waiting for name. Ah, there we go.
Rory, this is Gail. I think there's one more person. I think Michelle is trying to get on.
Okay.
Other than that.
Well, it's up to you. I mean, I will obviously let you start things
I think
off.
we should go ahead. I think we should go ahead. Mary, what
Okay.
do you think? I'm gonna keep my, if you and Ingrid wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, I will keep monitoring my email.
That sounds great, Gail. So I'll start and turn it over to Rory and Ingrid. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mary Moulton. I'm at the National Transportation Library in Washington, D.C. This is one in our series of webinars on core requirements and guidelines for trusted repositories. We invite you to attend the next two. We have one another one this week, and also the following week. And Gail will has sent out information about those webinars, but we're still expecting to cover the track certification program, as well as I'm having a brain lapse.
Yeah, Mary, it's Gail. So the 22nd of February at 2:30 in the afternoon is the Government Publishing Office.
Right, and they're going to talk about track certification.
Yeah. Yes.
And the one that we have this week, the additional one this week is on related to the one today on RDA. So please, if you're interested, join us live. We will be recording these sessions, and we'll make them available for replay. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Rory and Ingrid and let them introduce themselves and just say a little bit about who they are before they jump into the topic. Thank you so much.
Would you like to start, Ingrid, or should I?
If you start and I continue.
Okay, that sounds like an idea. Okay, so my name is Rory Edmonds, and I work for the ICSU World Data System, and I'm actually in the International Program Office as the Program Officer. ICSU WDS has had a certification, I think it opened 2011 originally, and it was basically created to certify WDS members. So in the past there was what was known as the World Data Centers, and also was it the Federation of Astrological and Geophysical Data Analysis Services, the FAGS. And when that system was kind of replaced, there was an idea that part of the reason that there hadn't been any modernization within these former regimes was because nobody was really monitoring them. So the scientific committee decided that it would look at what certifications were out there, and it would certify its members as part of the membership process. And so I've been working in the International Program Office since 2012, and a lot of my work has basically been along this area of certification, of bringing our members through the process. And it's kind of there that I've been part of this RDA working group as well, which Ingrid will explain a lot more about.
Okay, thank you, Rory. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. My name is Ingrid Dillo. I am Deputy Director of DANS, and DANS stands for Data Archiving and Network Services, and is a national data service provider in the Netherlands. We are part of the Royal Academy of Arts and Sciences in the Netherlands, as well as the Dutch Research Council. DANS was set up in 2005 and provides a number of services. The main service that we provide is a long-term data repository called EASY. The data seal of approval, about which we're also going to talk, was born here at our institution a very long time ago, around 2006, was later on handed over to an international board. And I am a member of that international board of DSA, and I'm also the vice chair of, one of the vice chairs of the scientific committee of the World Data System. So, and with that I would like to start my talk. As you can see, I would like to introduce you to the core trustworthy data repository requirements. And let me see how I go to the next screen, like this. So based on an email discussion we had for this webinar, I would like to concentrate my talk around two questions that were asked. One is about the philosophy and the process whereby we came up with the core requirements. And the second one deals with our experiences with this certification, and I would like to tell you something about the experiences of my own institution, DANS, but also show you some of the feedback that we have received from other organizations that went through core certification. So I would like to start with this graph. This graph represents the certification landscape as it is now for digital data repositories. And as you can see at the top of this pyramid, there is an ISO standard, the ISO 16363, based on TRAC, by the way. This is a very formal certification standard, and it's quite detailed, and it contains over 100 metrics, the standard. So that means a lot of work, and the ISO certification also comes with a formal external audit that you have to go through as an organization. So you will get people inside sitting at your desk looking over your shoulder and try to determine how you do your work. On just below that very formal level of certification, we find the extended certification. For the extended certification, there is the so-called Nestor seal. This standard has been developed in Germany. It is less detailed. It contains 34 criteria, so that's a lot less than the over 100 in the ISO standard. And this standard came about in a German working group that consisted of libraries, museums, archives, so it has more a cultural heritage background, you could say. This set of requirements works with a self-assessment. That's the procedure around it. You write a self-assessment that is then peer-reviewed, so that's different from the ISO standard. And then if you go to the basis of this pyramid, we find the core certification. And as you can see, there are two certification standards. There is the data seal of approval on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have the accreditation procedure of the World Data System. Here you see some of the characteristics of the data seal of approval as a core certification standard. It's a basic, lightweight certification standard that consists of only 16 guidelines, and it's based on a self-assessment that is done by the organization itself and involves no external auditors or site visits. The self-assessment is peer-reviewed, and this process is supervised by an international board. And the data seal of approval was granted for a period of 2 years. So every 2 years you had to go through a renewal of your seal in order to keep it up to date. The focus of the data seal of approval has always been mainly on the social sciences and humanities. And this can be explained by the fact that it was born in my institute, which has a strong focus in these disciplines. And the data seal of approval is particularly strong in Europe, and that has to do with the fact that a number of European research infrastructures have adopted the DSA as a requirement for long-term repositories that want to participate in these research infrastructures. And a number of them are here on the slide. CESDA for the social sciences, Clarin, Dario for the humanities, and UDAP. At the moment, around 70 seals have been acquired by repositories around the world. Now here you see the characteristics of the certification by the World Data System. Also a lightweight certification procedure for two categories of membership of WDS, the regular and the network members. This certification is also based on a self-assessment, is then peer-reviewed, and this process is overseen by the scientific committee of the WDS. There is a strong focus on earth and spatial sciences when you look at the accredited members. And there is also a large membership in the US and Asia. And the renewal period for WDS has been between 3 to 5 years. And also there are around 70 accredited members. So if you look at these two pictures, it becomes very evident that the data seal of approval and the certification by WDS look very much alike. There are a lot of commonalities. They're both lightweight standards. They're based on self-assessments and community review. But there's also a lot of complementarity in the geographical spread, with DSA being stronger in Europe and WDS more global, and also in the disciplinary spread of both standards. Now, the fact that these two standards look so alike, and the fact that the people behind these standards met under the umbrella of the Research Data Alliance has set in motion a whole process. As you may know, the Research Data Alliance is a very global organization that aims to build the social and technical bridges that enable open sharing of data. And this organization is very open bottom-up thing. So there are numerous working groups and interest groups working on a large variety of topics that all deal in some way with data sharing. And under the umbrella of the RDA, we have set up a working group that consisted of both representatives of DSA and WDS to try to explore and how we can work together, since we are doing such similar work. Now, why did we partner? Here you see a number of the reasons behind that. Of course, we wanted to realize efficiencies, and we also wanted to simplify the assessment options that are available, because it's confusing for stakeholders and also for organizations who want to go through certification, that there are two standards around that are more or less alike. And we also hope that by joining forces, of course, we can stimulate more certifications and we can increase the impact that this has on the community. So we worked within the RDA for well, I think almost 2 years. And what did we achieve? First of all, we brought together our two catalogs of criteria and tried, let's say, to make the best of both worlds and distill from these two catalogs a new catalog of requirements for core repository assessment. And this new catalog was also tested in a test bed that we run with 6 guinea pigs, 2 repositories from the DSA community and 4 repositories from the World Data System. We also tried to align our procedures for the assessment. So the new procedure consists again of a self-assessment that is then peer-reviewed by 2 reviewers. There is a tool available online that can be used both for filling out the self-assessment and submitting it, as well as for the peer review process. And we decided upon a 3-year renewal period, so the middle of both older standards. So after 3 years, you have to go through a renewal procedure. And once your application is successful, your self-assessment will also be made publicly available, because we think that transparency is very important. And of course, this does not mean that everything needs to be public. There can also be very good reasons for certain kinds of information that are in the self-assessment that should not be open to everyone. That's possible, of course, but let's say the default is that the self-assessment information is available on the web for everyone to see. So the new common requirements, they are divided into a number of topics, you could say. There is a criteria around the context of the repository, and there are criteria around the organizational infrastructure, around digital object management, technology, and there's also, and now I see that I use an old slide here, it should say one requirement around applicant feedback, and not two, so there's a mistake there. I'm sorry about that. So before I go into the specifics of the requirement, I would like also to mention that for each requirement in the standard there are compliance levels available. And these compliance levels run from 0 to 4. 0 means this requirement is not applicable for me. 1 means my repository has not considered this yet. 2, we have a theoretical concept. 3, we are in the implementation phase. And 4, the highest score, we have fully implemented this, this guideline, this requirement in the repository. The idea is that every applicant fills out these boxes, but on the other hand, you are not judged by it. We only judge the self-assessment on the basis of the text and the evidence that is supplied. But we want people to think about the compliance levels because we want people to think about their position. Where do you stand as a repository? What are your strengths? Where are the weaknesses? So it's a kind of benchmark that offers you the possibility to also rate the current maturity of your repository. And even if you don't go for a review, for a formal application, this can also be of use for repositories that are not there yet but want to see where the gaps are. So now let's have a closer look at the requirements. Here you see the elements that you need to think about when you fill out the context. There are questions about the type of repository that you have. Is it disciplinary? Does it have a national function? Is it part maybe of a larger organization or not? You also should give a brief description of the designated community that you serve, about the level or levels of curation that you perform, and of any about any partners where you outsource certain elements of your repository functions, and any other relevant information that you might have. The first block of real requirements then concern your organizational infrastructure. So there are requirements around your mission to provide access and to preserve data. It talks about licensing. You need to have a continuity plan to ensure ongoing access and preservation of your holdings. You need to make sure that the data that you have are created and curated and accessed in compliance with the norms in your discipline and ethical norms. You have to give proof that you have adequate funding and sufficient numbers of qualified staff. And there is a requirement around how you make sure that you have expert guidance within your repository. That can be external guidance from I don't know, advisory committee or something. It can also be in-house guidance. The second block of requirements deals with digital object management, so you come closer to the data itself. It concerns the integrity and authenticity of your data. You need to show that you have your data and metadata accepted on defined criteria to make sure that they are relevant and understandable for your designated community. You have to apply documented processes and procedures. And you, of course, have to have given your long-term preservation a proper thought in a planned and documented way. It also deals with your technical, technical quality of both your data and metadata. You need to define the workflows in your archive. You need to make sure that users can discover your data and also refer to them in a persistent way. So you need to have persistent identifiers. And you need to have appropriate metadata that support the understanding and the use of the data. So these all deal with digital object management. And that is the largest chunk of the catalog. Then there are also two requirements that deal with your technical infrastructure. On the one hand, this is about the operating systems and the infrastructural software that you are using. And there is also a requirement around security issues. And this deals not only with your technical infrastructure, but is much broader and also concerns your services, your users, and even the facility itself where the repository is housed. Here you see an example of a page from the catalog that deals with data integrity and authenticity, just to give you some visual idea of what it looks like. You can see here that you have to fill out the compliance level. There is a box where you can give your response to the requirement, and you can see that there is a guidance text that gives you some more context and background, that there are some questions that you could ask yourself in relation to this requirement. And it also gives you some suggestions for evidence that you could provide that goes with this requirement. And finally, there is also a little text about relations of this requirement with other requirements in the catalog. So you are guided through the catalog when you fill out your self-assessment. Now, these requirements are new. They replace the old DSA guidelines and also the old certification of WDS, and they were finalized at the end of last year. And here you can see the announcement on the RDA website, and you see two links that lead you to news items and the actual requirements themselves. So that is what I would like to say around the first question. What do these core requirements entail and how they came about? Now I would like to zoom in a little bit more on the experiences with core certification. Of course, these experiences are not yet based on the new catalog. They are based on former experiences, and then mainly with the data seal of approval, because I have experience mainly in that area. So let me start with my own institution. Like I said, DANS is a data service provider. We are an institute of around 50 people, part of the KNAW, the Dutch Academy of Sciences, and NWO, our research council. We were set up in 2005, so we are relatively young, but we were based on a number of very a lot older social sciences and humanities databases in the Netherlands. So our oldest holdings go back to the mid-1960s. We have a broad mission to promote permanent access to digital research information. And we started our own certification exercises for our own long-term repository in 2011. When we made certification an important part of our long-term policy strategy. In 2011, we got the data seal of approval, and in that same year, we were one of the guinea pigs in a test audit of the ISO 16363 standard at that time. We were one of 6 archives that went through the motion. And we learned a lot from that. We really clearly saw the gaps that we still had in our repository where we needed to do additional work. So that was really a learning process for us as well. In 2013, we renewed our data seal of approval, and in the 2 years after that, we acquired the Nestor seal, the German seal, the extended certification with which I started my talk, and we also became an accredited member of WDS. And for this year, we have, of course, on the agenda a new certification against the core requirements of the new standard, the new catalog. So we have been in this world for quite some time now. And what are our experiences? First of all, as you have already seen, of course, on the basis of the catalog that I just showed you, when you are going through a certification process, you need to look at a broad range of topics. It concerns all kinds of organizational aspects, your staffing, your financial situation, legal aspects, your archival workflows, all kinds of elements are touched upon. And in principle, if you have everything more or less in order, you need maybe to here and there describe certain policies maybe and processes, but sometimes it can also mean that you still need to develop policies that you haven't yet defined. You need to develop certain processes, and maybe you even have to add elements in your IT infrastructural situation. So depending on your level of entry, you need to do all kinds of things, and in the ideal world it is only filling out this format of your self-assessment, but in practice it usually means that you have to maybe write down things that are only in the heads of people, or maybe you even have to define things that you haven't thought about before. But it is very broad. So that means that the way we did it is we set up a core certification team that was responsible for the work, that did the planning, that discussed, that monitored progress, and that was partly also responsible for the work itself. But since it deals with so many aspects of the organization, in practice it means that many colleagues within the Institute with certain specific expertise were at some point in time involved in the actual work. And it's also very important that there is a responsibility on management level to go for such a target, because the things that you need to do in order to get certified are usually more or less in the back office. These are mostly not the things that are on the top of the priority list of the director. So it's very important to get this go on management level in order to also push the work in the organization. What is the effort that is involved with a core certification in practice? Well, the effort that is involved, of course, highly depends on your level of entry. So it's always very important to do a quick scan to look, for example, on the basis of the compliance levels, where you stand as a repository, and whether it is already time to go for a formal certification or not. So the effort will rise if you still need to do a lot of real work, define policies, change things in your infrastructure, etc., to comply with the guidelines. And of course, as you will have understood already, the effort also rises when you climb, let's say, the certification ladder to an extended or a formal certification. The higher you aim, the more effort it takes. Here you see the effort that we at DANS have put in the renewal of our data seal of approval in 2013, and as you can see, this adds up to around 250 hours of work, and you can see a division, a rough division here. Most of the work was in the technical development because we still missed a number of elements that we needed to implement. But even the writing of the self-assessment itself, as you can see, took almost 100 hours. So It's not huge, but still it's substantive work, and most of all because this was a renewal. Here you see some other figures. In the Netherlands last year we did a survey among current DSA seal holders, and this survey was done by the National Coalition for Digital Preservation in the Netherlands. They approached all the data seal approval seal holders and asked them a couple of questions. And one of these questions was, how much time did you invest in getting your seal? And here you can see that the orientation phase took around 20 hours, where people try to assess, should we go or shouldn't we go for this? The preparation phase, so the self-assessment itself, took around 100 to 200 hours, according to 80% of the interviewees. And the peer review process, so let's say the discussion with the reviewers, took around 50 to 100 hours for 80% of the interviewees. So this gives you some idea of the effort involved, at least from the side of the DSA, of course. Now, why do repositories invest in such a certification effort? Here you see a number of arguments that the DSA seal holders themselves bring forward. Of course, there is the element of building stakeholder confidence in the repository. And then this mainly concerns the funders and the publishers, for example. I think when you talk to researchers, whether a repository has or hasn't got a certification is of less importance. Researchers are mainly led, I think, by the reputation that a repository has among their peers. But for funders, it's important, and I think it will even become more important over time, due to the fact that funders are more and more mandating open data and data management policies. Certification is also important because it raises awareness about digital preservation. It also improves communication within the repository, and this again is linked to the fact that it deals with so many aspects of your organization. It improves repository processes. It ensures transparency. I already told you that at least the old DSA self-assessments are all available on the web, and this will also be the case with the new standard. And it's also a possibility to differentiate your repository, your organization, of course, from others who haven't got the certification, who haven't got the seal. And here you see some of the outcomes of this survey with respect to the perceived benefits. Here you see the same elements returning: importance of awareness raising, building stakeholder confidence, having improved internal processes, and also improved documentation. And I very much like the quote. You see there the experience of applying and the issues that came up during the process have turned out to be very positive and are helping us consolidate our quality-related working lines. When I look at my own organization, why do we invest so much time and effort in all of these certification standards? On the one hand, it is, of course, the external argument of building trust in your repository with clients, depositors and users, but also partner organization and funders. But maybe even more important for me personally is the fact that this certification effort more or less gives me a big stick to further develop and professionalize our core services and our workflow and even our organization as a whole, because it helps you to get things done that are usually on the lower level of your list of priorities, but which, on the other hand, are very important for an organization that wants to be a professional partner. So also the overall judgment by the interviewees in this survey is positive. They feel that the benefits are tangible and are also critical to the continuing fulfillment of their mission. And about the ratio between investment and benefit, most of them see this as adequate to rewarding and even rewarding to excellent. And what is also very important is that almost no one aimed for certification at a higher level, so for the nest or seal or for the ISO standard. I think the ISO standard asks so much of an organization that for a lot of repositories this is just too high an aim and might not even be necessary to build confidence with funders and other stakeholders. So, main takeaways. One of the things that I would like to say is if you think about going for such a certification, always start with an internal quick scan to determine the level of entry against the catalog of requirements. Just try to for each requirement to identify on the basis of a quick scan where you stand at the moment and see how much effort is needed to make a real effort to go for a seal, for a certification. And once you have done that, you can go for the real thing. Commitment from the top is crucial because you have to make time to do work that is not on the top priority list of an organization. And you also need to get a broad support within the organization because it deals with a lot of issues around the organization. And at DONS I always try to do that by organizing working lunches and keeping everyone informed about where we are, but also why this is so important for our organization. And also, last but not least, use the framework. So don't start with an ISO standard, but please start with the core level. And all the work that you do at the lower levels is already done when you, if you want to go for the ISO standard, you can use all that earlier work. It's not wasted to if you start at the core level. And I think that is what I would like to tell you this morning about core certification. And I hope that it has been interesting. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
This is Mary Moulton again. Thank you so much, Ingrid. This was, speaking for myself, I think this is the most valuable presentation I've seen to date. And you answered so many of the questions and concerns that I know that our working group has had. So thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I'd like to invite our participants to ask questions now, and you can either do that by unmuting yourself and using your microphone, or if you're on the phone, your phone. Also, if you want to send a chat message, I can read the message, or Ingrid can read the message, and she can reply that way. So the floor is open to questions.
Ingrid, this is Gail. I'm just wondering, you mentioned the number of hours, but what is the kind of expected or average calendar time in which this kind of certification takes place?
Again, I would say it's very difficult to give you an average there because it really depends on where you stand. But if I need to say, give you an average, I would say something between 3 or 4 months. If you're not a complete newcomer and you have to do a lot, but of course if you have everything in order and you only need to write everything down in the format, it takes you a week or 2 weeks. I've seen examples of that, but let's say on average 3 to 4 months I think is reasonable.
Hi Ingrid, this is Michelle Podgornick with the Centers for Disease Control here in the United States. Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. As Mary said, this is fantastic information and answered a lot of my questions. My question to you is, do you feel that repositories that are that go through a process that does not have a third-party audit are viewed as highly as those that do go through that full process. Does that make sense?
Can you say that one more time, because I didn't hear the last bit of your question. You asked whether a repository that has not been reviewed by a third party, and then I lost you.
Okay, yeah. So those that are not reviewed by a third party, do you feel that they're seen as in high of a light as those that are reviewed by a third party?
Well, I think we are in a kind of, let's say, a period of transition. Because what I see is that funders and also publishers with data availability policies that want the data behind articles also to be preserved for a long time are trying to look for instruments by which they can assess repositories that really provide longevity and a long-term assurance. One of these instruments, of course, can be certification. If a repository has this third-party certification, that gives an extra reassurance that the data are safe there. That is one thing. But on the other hand, the certification standards have not been around for that long. So what you see, for example, is that in the social sciences and humanities, there are a lot of repositories already that have a certification. That also counts, I think, for the earth and spatial sciences. But for example, the whole area of life sciences, where the standards have not originated, there are hardly any certified repositories at this point in time. And that doesn't mean that all of these repositories that are around are bad, not at all, but they are not yet introduced to this world of certification. But my feeling is that this is rapidly changing because funders are demanding more reassurance. And then I think in that area, third-party certification will become more and more important.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ingrid, this is Lynn Pedersen with the Environmental Protection Agency in the U.S. And we were wondering if you had any experience with shared repositories, for example, with different organizations, entities sharing a repository with their data.
Yeah. I think distributed repositories will be a phenomenon with which we need to find a solution. What we see already in the old data seal of approval, it was possible to outsource requirements to other organizations, and that is also so with the new core requirements. So it's possible for a repository to outsource certain elements to third parties, and you can still get your seal, your certification, but you have to provide evidence that there is a proper SLA that and that the other organization that takes care of part of these of your workflow also complies with the requirement that it applies to. Do I make myself clear? So it's possible, but you have to show that there is an adequate SLA. But it's possible to outsource elements.
Thank you.
Ingrid, this is Gail again. Can you speak a little bit about the process for peer review?
Yes. So, like I said, there is an online tool available. You write your self-assessment, so you do all the work and you think, well, now we have everything in order. Then you, no, I should start earlier, but Rory might correct me if I'm telling things wrong here. The first thing you do is you make an entry in the tool, and that way the organization knows that you are that you have the intention to submit a self-assessment. And then we already start looking for reviewers. The moment you upload your self-assessment in the tool, the reviewers will get a notification and they will start reviewing your self-assessment. And now I'm not sure the period, is it 2 or 3 months? Maybe Rory knows. But there is a certain period, a couple of months, in which this process, in which the reviewers get the opportunity to report back, and usually then there begins a discussion between the applicant and the reviewers. There are maybe some questions, or 1 or 2 issues should be further refined, or whatever. So it goes up and down a bit. Until finally, hopefully, the assessment is approved and the certification is acquired. But I'm not sure the period. Rory, do you know?
So in WDS, it's always been a little bit more ad hoc, in all honesty. So I know in the DSA it's been a little bit, mainly I think because of the size of the board and that they were taking on all the work, you had to be a little bit more rigorous and strict about it. But in WDS, the process has been thus far that you submit what we call an expression of interest for membership, and there's 4 different categories, 2 of which are certified and 2 of which are co-opted. For the 2 that are certified, the process is that we present that to the scientific committee and they say, yes, please go ahead. Now, of course, before the common certification between DSA and WDS came along, that then meant that we continued that process purely through WDS and the scientific committee. But now we are going to have a separate board, joint board, which will deal with these things. But the idea was supposed to be in WDS that you complete the application over however long that takes you, and you have an opportunity to ask for feedback, or you have you can ask for a full review. For feedback, for some people it was normally that they were stuck on a particular point, in which case actually we at the IPO could help. But if it was a more complete application, then normally we put it pretty much through a full review process. But as regards sort of reviewers, we tended to do it normally based at the time on who we felt was most suitable for that particular applicant when it came up. And we've never had a very specific timeline for that. We've always tried to say within 2 months, because the scientific committee was only meeting once a month, so it meant we normally needed a month to get things prepared, and then a month maybe for the review and a decision. So we're looking at approximately a 2-month turnaround originally in WDS. Again, we haven't really discussed this for the joint board yet, and these are things that have to be decided rather quickly.
Yeah, we're a little bit in flux now, of course, because we are just starting up. We just got the first assessment, self-assessments based on the new common requirements. So we are still in the process of defining all of these elements. But usually around 2 to 3 months, you should get an answer when you have submitted your self-assessment.
And quite often that answer is, well, you're there or thereabouts, but please supply more information on X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
And obviously the reviewers give quite specific feedback that is then responded to.
We probably have time for one more quick question if anyone has a question for Rory or Ingrid. Well,
Mary,
Gail.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Did you have something to say?
Yes, there were so many people who hopped on later. I just thought I would mention again that we have the data curation folks are hosting a call and a web meeting this Wednesday. That will be at 1:30, and that's a presentation by Joan Starr from the California Digital Library about the EZIB program and persistent identifiers. And then on the 22nd at 2:30 Eastern Time, we'll have another webinar in this series where we'll be hearing from the Government Publishing Office about their certification program and initiative. So if you don't see those invites in your box, let me or Mary know, and I'll be glad to get you the information.
Gail, this is Sylvia. Did you send the one for the GPO already?
No.
Okay, so I haven't.
Okay, letting people know.
Right, and so it's next Tuesday?
I will send it out right away after this. I didn't want to confuse and have people sitting on that, on that call-in information this morning. So, so no, not yet, but it's coming.
Okay, thank you, dear.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, I'd like to give a big thanks to Rory and Ingrid for this really fantastic presentation. And this presentation, as well as the one we had last week with the National Archives, will be available. Like I said at the beginning, it's going to take me a few days to accomplish this, if not until next week. But the National Transportation Library will archive these presentations, and they will be available to the public from our repository for replay. And we'll make sure that everyone gets a link to that. Thank you for attending today, and hopefully we'll see you either later this week or next week for the presentation from the Government Printing Office. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.